There is, if we are being honest, plenty of reason for the US markets to feel edgy at the moment. The country has erupted in protest at the murder of George Floyd, leading to states to militarize their own streets. The American coronavirus death toll sits the wrong side of 100,000. There's evidence that countries like South Korea are seeing COVID-19 cases start to once again increase post-lockdown easing. And, most pressingly, the situation between the US and China is getting ugly. Beijing has attempted to tighten its grip on Hong Kong with new national security laws and a bill banning mockery of the Chinese national anthem. This has been greeted with pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, a flood of armed police on the streets, and the displeasure of Donald Trump, who has promised to take action against China. In his anxiety-inducing press conference on Friday, Trump announced that the USA would be revoking Hong Kong's preferential treatment status for trade and travel, no longer viewing the region as autonomous from China. Given what markets were expecting, something that would explicitly damage the US-China trade deal, this news was actually a relative relief. However, that relief might prove to be short-lived. Even if the move didn't cause the immediate disintegration of the trade deal, it is another issue for the two superpowers to be at war over, joining their precarious trade relationship and the president's repeated attacks on China relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the November election draws closer and closer, and the domestic situation in the US remains explosive, Trump is only going to be looking for more aggressively play the blame game with China in an attempt to find a scapegoat for his own failings. As for the week's economic calendar, the Chinese Caixin and US market and ISM manufacturing PMIs arrive on Monday, with American services PMIs and factory orders on Wednesday, and usual jobless claims on Thursday. This all builds to the big one, Friday's non-farm jobs report. The most recent figures covering the month of April saw 20.5 million jobs lost, causing a spike in wage growth to 4.7% due to the kind of jobs that were actually lost. The unemployment rate, meanwhile, was a tad better than forecast, though it still shot up from 4.4% to 14.7% month on month. In terms of this Friday, another 8 million jobs are expected to have been lost in May, with the unemployment rate shooting up to 19.5%. Wage growth, meanwhile, is set to return back to 1%, again perhaps giving an indication of the kind of jobs that were lost in the second wave during May. How much investors actually pay attention to these figures, however, will be dependent on the bigger picture issues currently facing the US, the biggest being the situation between the US and China. Again, last Friday's press conference from Trump was sort of a hastily scheduled affair, with investors waiting the entirety of Friday before they actually got an idea of when Trump would be appearing. The same thing could happen this week, just because he didn't announce firmer action against Beijing last week doesn't mean that it won't be forthcoming. Especially since Trump will be looking to try and distract from what is going on in the US internally. Beyond that, there are the usual sort of wild card situations that could shift sentiment in the US, namely a rogue appearance from the Federal Reserve, which did hint a couple of weeks ago that it's still got plenty left in the tank in terms of monetary policy to combat the coronavirus pandemic. And then also any vaccine news. Even though vaccine news tends to be overreacted to by the markets, it does tend to garner a pretty huge reaction from investors, even if the headlines are misguiding as to when a vaccine will actually be available. Any kind of positive update on any of the various vaccines from around the world could garner a huge positive reaction from investors. And counter any negative news regarding the US and China situation.